Pat. Thank you, Pat. Thank you for having me here. I'm really happy to be at LeadDev. I love this conference. And I'm happy to be here talking to you about something that has been helping me in my career in the last few years. And I hope it will help you too. So, setting goals as a senior individual contributor. Today I want to talk to you about how to define your personal development journey as a senior engineer, figuring out what you should be working on, how to set your goals, and how to keep track of your progress. But isn't this a manager's conference, right? This is not Staff Plus yet. So I'm hoping you all agree that you don't need a manager in your title to be an engineer, a leader in an engineering organization. More and more companies are investing in the senior engineer track in order to support engineers as they grow. As leaders, we need to set our own goals, balancing your personal goals, the team's and the company's goals, and prioritizing based on that what to do and what not to do. This is important, as I said, for both managers and individual contributors once they reach a more senior level. So throughout this talk, I'll be addressing a senior individual contributor, but I hope this talk will also help managers of those engineers or engineers that are going through the transition to that role. And maybe there are some tips that you can use as managers too. So, you got promoted as a senior contributor, individual contributor engineer. What does that look like? Well, it depends. It's a familiar phrase for all of us here. It depends when we're talking about technical trade-offs, other decisions, but it also depends when you're talking about your role and your personal development. So it will depend on your company size and how teams are organized where you work. It will depend on the role expectation as defined by your career levels at your company, and also how autonomous you're expected to be at that level. And it will also depend on yourself and your own experience, your preferences, and what kind of engineer you are. So it depends, with that in mind. This role can also go by many names, right? Staff Plus, Staff, Principal, Distinguished. Again, it depends on where you work, but usually they have one thing in common. One of the main changes that happen when you're promoted into this type of role is that you're not working with one specific team anymore. So you might be working with a group of teams or an area, but or changing teams depending on your goals, but you don't belong to one specific team anymore. So how does that change impact you? Well, before, when you're part of a team, your goals were your team's goals, right? You also had your own personal goals, but the main focus for you was to deliver on your team's goals. Now that you're not part of a team anymore, how do you know what you should be focused on? By not being part of a specific team anymore, or before, when you're part of a specific team, you join all their meetings, you're part of all the communications, Slack channels, emails. Now that you're not part of those team rituals anymore, how do you know what's going on? How do you keep context of what's happening around the company? Before, you were evaluated mostly on execution and delivery of projects, right? Did I do what we were supposed to be doing? But now we're evaluated on other things, like leadership skills, strategic thinking, communication, coordination, and coding is just one of the things that you do. So what else should you be doing? So this role change not only expands the scope and the impact of the work that you do, but it also changes the kind of work that you do. And if you don't actively think about those goals, it's easy to be busy and don't have any impact on what you're doing. So this busy work is always coming at you, fires or work that you're not the most suited person to be doing. So for example, maybe continuing mostly coding when there are other ways for you to be effective. Things like that, they always come up. There's plenty of busy work to do, but you know that that's not what you're supposed to be doing. So you're supposed to be doing high impact work now that you're a leader, right? So where do you find this magic backlog of high impact work? You create it yourself. It's up to you. So as a senior plus engineer, it's up to you to identify what you should be working on. Your role now is to gather context, evaluate opportunities, and help shape what you and even other teams and other people are working on. So I'll talk you through the process that I use to help me create and prioritize this backlog of high impact work. What I do is I create a personal backlog of these tasks, ideas, projects, goals, similarly to maybe how a team would create their own backlog. But a caveat here is that this wasn't defined in one day. So this was an iterative process that I've been improving and tailoring to what I need for the past few years. So please don't take it as an all or nothing approach. Pick and choose the things that help you and improve your own process as you go. So let's go through the process. A backlog needs a starting point, a list of inputs, right? So all the possible things that you could be doing. Where I look at first is business and product strategy. So maybe you're working with a specific group of teams or a product area. So what is that product strategy? How is business thinking about that, and how does it fit with the wider company goals? At this level, you should be learning more and more about how your company works and different disciplines, like finance, sales, marketing, and working closely with product leaders. You should definitely expand your network beyond just the engineering org. And also think about what's coming next. So in the next quarter, the next 6 months, the next year. Are there any risks and opportunities? Are there any things that you can help disambiguate or evaluate ahead of time? Next, what I look at are teams' needs. So if you're working closely with a group of teams, think about their needs. Are there any executional challenges ahead? Are there any riskier or more ambiguous projects that you could help with? At this point, I review the team's backlogs, their own backlog, and spot anything that might need more help. And I also talk to managers and see what help they might need. And as I mentioned before, like, is there any work that you can do ahead of a team to help disambiguate or evaluate so that when the team takes it on, it's a little bit more validated? And then finally, the engineering org's needs, so your department. Are there cross-team initiatives that can help elevate all of engineering that you might want to either propose or maybe be part of? So those could be things like technical strategy, automated testing, CD practices, and so on. But they could also be related to people and processes, so recruiting, processes improvements, and things like that. They're not just for managers. It's really great to have input from engineers in those areas as well. So, tip for you managers. What you can do here to help your senior engineers to share context. So help them by sharing information that they might not be aware of. So you might be in meetings or talking to people that the senior engineer is not. So make sure you share that context and create connections with other teams and other leaders to help them. So once they have a list of inputs, to prioritize them by company needs first. Your main goal should be, to deliver on what the company is trying to do. That's why we get paid for it. So sometimes that might not be the thing you spend most of your time on, but it's good to call out that as the most important thing so that you would drop something else if you needed. And then prioritize by risk. So they could be product risk or technical risks, so areas that are new for the company or complex projects, operational risks, so performance, scalability, and even organizational risks. So maybe there's a new team or there's a team that doesn't have senior engineer support that you might need to help. Next, match your personal growth areas to those initiatives that you've identified and prioritized. What feedback did you get in your last performance review? Review the level description and think about the areas that you want to develop. And for the areas that you're strong at, think about the next level. What does that look like? Can you stretch yourself? So you should identify any initiatives that you want to drive or make the case for that will help with your personal growth goals. For managers, be great, do a great, support them connecting great performance reviews to the goals that the engineer identified. So you can also help by putting your weight behind some initiative that the engineer wants to do by sponsoring a project for them. Finally, this list that you created is real gold, right? But you won't have time to tackle everything. So you should trim it down, and you trim it down by delegating. Are there opportunities for delegation here? Are there things that others can take on from your list? As a principal engineer, mentoring and growing engineers is part of my role. So it's really important to be a multiplier and share what you've uncovered. So as managers, again, you can help by finding other owners. So you might have the context of other people that might want to take on some of those tasks, even with support of the senior engineer, but help create those connections between people. So now you have an achievable list of prioritized inputs with your personal growth goals align with them, and they are prioritized by company needs and risks. So, time to write it down. Definitely use the tool of your choice, right? I'm not saying you have to use the spreadsheet, that's what I use. But the most important thing is that it's somewhere that you can refer to easily and you can update easily. So yeah, this is the format that I use. I don't go through the columns, but each row is a goal. So the first column is a copy of the principal engineer level area that goal is related to. So this makes it clear how the goal aligns to my personal growth goals. And this is also how my manager is measuring my impact, so it's good to have that as a reference to how, and align that to what I'm expected to do. Then the next two are the most important columns, so commitment and impact. Commitment is what I'll do. So deliver a tech strategy for automated testing or a new version of an interview rubric and so on. And the impact is, if I do this right, what benefits will we see? How will the world be a better place if I deliver on the commitments that I made? This part is really, really hard to articulate. I cannot emphasize that enough. It's quite hard to express what that means. If there are any ways that you can use metrics or any way that you can measure that impact, incredible, but that's not always possible. So one other way that I found that's really good to get feedback, or to understand your impact, is to get feedback from the people that hopefully will benefit from the work that you're doing. So asking them before, what do they expect to get from your goal? And then after you've done the goal, did you get that and how did that help them? So it's really useful to get feedback from people. And then the final two are about setting expectations. So is this, am I a driver for this role or am I supporting someone? And the priority is either main or secondary. So there's one main goal and then everything else is secondary. Here's an example. Hopefully you can read. But yeah, I'll go for the first one. So the level expectation for principal at Intercom says, monitor and raise the bar of good technical design. And the goal here is to define and implement an engineering code metric for quality. And the impact is that teams will be able to monitor the quality and invest in improvements as needed, and I'm driving, and this is my main goal. And then the second one there is an example of a secondary goal where I'm supporting an engineer that's driving a project and helping them with their promotion. So that's kind of the idea. So once you have that first draft, you might be missing some context still. Remember, you don't have a view of everything, right? So it's really good to share it with others. First, I ask for feedback and any expectations from my manager. Hopefully, this is not the first time that they're seeing it, so it's been a continuous process with them, and I've been getting, you've been getting regular feedback in your one-on-ones. So this is more about confirming, I think I'm done, this is it, I'm going to share it more widely. Are you okay with that? So that's the first step. And then once you're happy, you should also share it with your peers, so other senior plus engineers. This is a good time to check if the riskiest areas or problems, like you're all aligned in what's important and what you should work on and what others should work on. And I also share with cross-discipline peers. So for me, it would be designers, product managers, or other people that you work with more closely in the areas that you're working on. This is a great way to answer that question, like how do I know what's going on? Those conversations, when you're sharing your goals, will help form a relationship with teams and other disciplines and other leaders, and it helps you gather the context that you might be missing by not working that closely with teams anymore. And it also helps the other way as well, and it helps manage upwards. So it can help you be the voice of tech and help others understand what's important to you and why that's important. So your conversations end up becoming pollinators when you're talking about your goals, because you're sharing what you're doing and also why, and what you're not doing as well. So once it's done, what I share and when I'm happy with it, and my manager's happy with it as well, I share with people, like with everyone that I work with. So I make a public version of that spreadsheet that's easier to digest, and I share it widely with everyone that's wanting to see it. So it's a really great place to put like my commitments and why I'm doing things. But also if you're expected to do something that maybe got deprioritized or you decided for some reason not to do it, it's also good to put it there and say, well, I'm not doing X because of Y, and then making that clear. I also use this document to reiterate how principal engineers work and what to expect from me, because depending on my goals, I might be working more closely with some teams, or I might be more hands-off. So it's a really good place to say, this is what you expect from me, this is how I'm going to work with teams. And yeah, repeat. So this is not a one-off process, right? Now you have your goals, they're prioritized, they're aligned with your personal goals, growth goals, but you should find the right cadence to review and reiterate on your goals and what you're doing. This is my timeline. So Intercom plans quarterly roadmaps for teams, so I found that to be a good cadence for me when I'm setting my own goals, because that's the time where teams are setting their own goals. So I define my own goals quarterly. Then I break them down into 2 milestones. So I break the quarter down to 2 6-week periods, and each of those periods I have a milestone to achieve related to that goal. Breaking it down really helps estimate, and it's kind of easier to see what you can do instead of thinking about the whole, like 3 months, thinking about the 6 weeks, 4 months. Yeah. And then each week, I will review it. So I review each milestone and the quarterly goal related to it, and then plan my next week based on what progress I want to make. So I might not be making progresses on every single goal, but it's good to keep an eye on what's going on and how much time I'm spending on different goals. I also use the weekly review to keep track of my progress. I write down what I achieved, I link to any documents or any artifacts that I produced, or any outcome or impact that I had, any feedback that I got, positive or negative, or anything that I'm proud of. I just jot it down there. And then I use the second, so this is every week, and I use the second cycle beginning to review the goal overall and see, is the milestone that I set for the next 6 weeks, is that achievable still? And at the end of the quarter, review the full quarter and kind of go back to see what happened. So you review the previous quarter's progress and decide if anything you're going to carry over from your goals. So over a quarter is a really great way to look back and see each step that you took to achieve a goal, and maybe where things got derailed or what went well. It's important to adapt and change because things will change. There we go. Things will change. When they change, what do you do? So someone's asking you to do something that's not part of your goals, or change what you're doing. So what to do? First, ask yourself, am I missing any context, right? Things do change. This is not set in stone. Is there anything here that changed since I defined those goals? So if they have, reprioritize, talk to your manager, reset. That's cool. Or you can ask that question again, can it be delegated, right? Is there anyone else that can take this over? Again, talk to other managers and see if they can help. If nothing has changed and you still feel like your goals are the priority that you should be working on, say not no, but you can say not now, and explain to the person that's asking for the change to why your other priorities are more important for you. So I think usually when you do that, people are quite understanding. And you can take note of that request too, and that can become a good input for your next goal setting period. Cool. Yes. But Sabrina, what about coding, right? This is an individual contributor role after all. How do I find impactful coding work? I do believe as senior plus individual contributors, we should still be shipping production code and delivering customer value. It might not happen every day. That's definitely the case for me. It doesn't happen every day, but it needs to happen enough that we understand the shape of the code base, the shape of our architecture and the infrastructure, and the problems that both engineers and customers have with our product or the code base. So we should be doing it, but how do we find the time, right? There's always lots of things to do. Well, I just told you, right? You set your goals, you define the priority, and you carve out the time to do that work. So the same way that you prioritize any other goal. Think about why you want to spend time coding. What is that going to achieve? So I have an example, speaking of on-call, Charity mentioned that before, but when I joined Intercom, I was trying to get onboarded to the code base, which is quite big and broad. So how do I do that? Where do I start? What I did was I joined the on-call rota for a few teams. And this was a really great way for me to get a broad overview of the whole code base, but also deep dives into areas that have bugs or issues, right? So if there's an incident, if there's a bug or something is gone wrong, It shows you that there is something that is valuable for someone because either they complain or they say, well, there's an issue here. And it's also something that could be made better. So those are really good signals that this could be impactful work. But beyond just fixing like the immediate bug or issue or project that you're delivering, think about the coding task as a way to understand it from a wider, like a bigger picture, spotting any problems, any risks, any opportunities that you see while you're doing that coding task. So as a senior engineer, you have that, the scope and the impact, and hopefully you have the resources to find ways to address wider problems as you're working on individual coding tasks. Yeah, cool. So setting goals as a senior individual contributor and more. I found that setting my goals intentionally helped me beyond just my personal development and figuring out what to do. So it helps me, first of all, introduce the role of principal engineer. Like, as I said, it depends so much where you work and what kind of role you have and the level that you're at. So it's a really good way for me to set the expectations and introduce my role to new teammates or new teams. Yeah, given how much they change, or even within a company, different people have different approaches to this role. So it's really useful to have that reference to what I'm doing and why, and also explain, you know, when someone joins a team, I can point to that publicly available document and say, this is what I do and why. It also helps me focus, so saying no if more comes, as I said, or intentionally reprioritizing if needed, and helping me not get distracted by that busy work and fires that are everywhere. And I think most importantly for me is it helps me keep motivated. I think someone mentioned in a previous talk that our feedback cycle as leaders is a lot less immediate than when you're coding, to say the least. Changes take longer, and you might either be caught up in fighting fires all the time and forget the big picture and forget, like, yeah, why you're doing this. So it's really a way for me to keep myself motivated and energized to know that I have an overall goal, this is how I'm going to achieve it, and this is the progress that I'm making. So those reviews are, for me, a great way to keep myself motivated. And also it helps me grow, right? So because I tie my goals to the levels and what I'm expected to do, and potentially even to the next level and what that next level should be doing, my self-assessment, my performance review is very easy to write. Well, it's easier to write. It's also easy for my manager as well, because he has, you know, the story of what I've done in the previous quarter and what impact that I had. So, what's next for you? So that helps showing when I'm ready for the next level. This intentionality in setting goals and defining how you spend your time can also help you reach your next career level. So each time that you set your goal and you review your progress, you're creating a track record of what you've done and the impact that had. So, and then when you pick goals aligned with your personal growth areas, you'll be exercising those growth areas and showing how you have progressed. Where do you go as a staff, principal, senior plus engineer? Again, it depends. What this means to you depends on your company, as I said, and the size and how career levels are defined. But expanding your role as a senior plus engineer usually means increasing the level of impact and scope that you have. So maybe you went from one team to teams, to groups of teams, to a whole product area, or to the whole organization. So this is usually the path that you go, similarly to how managers grow as well. Then something that people also ask is, can I become a manager after I was a senior plus engineer, or even before that? And yes, I used to be a manager. I can admit to that. Yeah. Charity Majors, who's here, has an amazing blog post about the engineer-manager pendulum that you should definitely check it out. And we have lots of examples at Intercom of people that did just that, either from a manager to an individual contributor, back to a manager, and back again. And we also have a blog post that a colleague of mine wrote about that, that I'll share later. That's really great. So definitely, you can move tracks, and I think those things, that change will make you a better engineer and a better manager as you learn different things and exercise different areas of your career. So, As senior plus engineers, your role is to gather context and evaluate opportunities to help shape what you, yourself, and other people in your organization should focus on. So it's really important to think about what you want to achieve and why. You can do this by creating your personal backlog of high-impact work, prioritizing by risk and company needs, trimming it down by delegating and deprioritizing some things. Obviously, you won't be able to do everything. Getting feedback and sharing that with others so you get the context and you make sure that you are aligned with what other people are doing, your peers and other teams. Then you can break it down once you have the goal defined into milestones and track your progress so that you know how you're growing and how your career is developing. And repeat. That's it. Thank you very much.